Hello, my name is Baylen Cusick, and this is going to be my signature assignment on the effect of psilocybin on mental disorders. Um, just a quick kind of introduction. Recently, there's been a huge increase in mental disorders, and here it's talked about all the time in the news, and I think it's a really big problem that we're having as kind of like a society. So I wanted to kind of go through a treatment that might help a lot of these people. And one of those treatments is the use of a psychedelic drug called psilocybin. All right. So the main disorder that we're going to be talking about today is PTSD, and specifically, we're going to be talking about psilocybin, but there are other drugs that can help with these things. So PTSD, first off, is a disorder where a person experiences something traumatic and they kind of constantly live in this fear that this traumatic event has caused them. And what psilocybin is it's the active form of a compound called psilocybe, which comes from ingesting magic mushrooms. Or they can synthesize in a lab too without having to ingest the mushrooms. Um, but well, but this compound causes an effect. Um, Most people call it like a trip or whatever. And while you're having this experience from this drug, you often feel very euphoric, you sometimes hallucinate, increase heart rate, and it can change your consciousness. Like it can change your mood, your thought, and your perception of things. So what psilocybin does to the brain? So psilocybin, it gets broken down into a smaller chemical called psilocin. And that has a very, very similar structure to serotonin, which, if you don't know, serotonin is a very natural chemical that is in your brain kind of all the time. I called it a feel-good chemical because that's kind of what it does. So, since psilocin and serotonin are very similar in structure, the psilocin can activate the serotonin receptors, kind of, I don't want to say overflowing, but overflowing that sensation, which gives you these psychedelic effects as well as the kind of perception change. So, how psilocybin affects trauma? Um, Psilocybin works by basically reducing the activity of your amygdala, which is your fear center. So, people who are on psilocybin can relive through these traumatic experience they have with this reduced activity in their amygdala, kind of letting them work through it without having fear, basically. And so that hopefully they can get past it and not be so fearful in their daily lives. So, how people interact with the world. People with PTSD and other mental disorders often have a very hard time interacting with the world. Uh, like I said, an example would be like if you have a car accident and now you have PTSD being in cars where you just keep reliving the accident, it can make it really hard to get around. So by taking this psilocybin treatment, it hopefully allows you to be able to not necessarily get over, but not be so afraid where you can't use what you need to use in everyday life. Um, so effect on cognition, my field of interest. I personally think that this affects kind of my field of interest, which is basically genetics or all of kind of biology, is basically we've been told all the time that drugs are bad, you shouldn't use drugs. And this kind of goes to show you that what we've been told in the past isn't always true. And I think that needs to be told for a lot of science. Like just because we've learned something in the past doesn't mean it's going to stay true in the future. And I think that's like the biggest impact that it's going to have. Like if we've learned something and then we discover something new, we need to not dwell on the past. We need to like keep pushing forward, you know? And then, so why I'm interested in these studies because overall, I'm just kind of interested in, this is going to sound a little weird, but I'm interested in drugs because they do a chemical change in the body. And I am really interested in like the kind of biochemistry of the brain and how everything interacts, as well as involves mushrooms, which I think mushrooms are incredibly interesting. Not just magic mushrooms, all sorts of mushrooms, because they're not plants, they're not animals, they're kind of their own separate entity. Um, the most important thing I learned is truly just how many people are suffering from mental illnesses. Um, it's truly just unthinkable how many people have different types of depression, different types of mental disorders like um, bipolar disorder, PTSD, and really there's like no cure all for any of these. So I think all the treatments that we're learning about are all super important. Why others should know. Um, this is something I'm fairly passionate about is I think that we need to kind of like reschedule a lot of the drugs. I think um, the whole drug scheduling system is very outdated. And I think that the more people who know about this, hopefully can like we can get to the point where we can reschedule a lot of these drugs and then research like these that are really important can actually like go through because a lot of the times um, these drug researchers have a really hard time getting funding, getting off the ground because the government doesn't want to schedule or doesn't want to deal with these very high scheduled drugs. In conclusion, um, there's a whole lot of trauma related disorders. They're on the rise and there's no real treatment for them. But psilocybin has been working in some cases, in a lot of cases. And I think that people should know about it. And then these are my references. Thank you.